Yeah, this is our first podcast, which is kind of exciting, I guess, albeit we have loads of videos on LinkedIn already. Yeah. So as a bit of an introduction, let's start talking, I guess. That'll get us up and running.
Smooth.
We're going to talk about kind of four main topics that are directly connected with each other that I suppose are associated with this podcast series that we're doing, you know.
The fifth point is connection, right?
Connection, yeah. Which is
I think
very
it's
important.
something we're gonna mention a lot.
Yeah.
How all these issues and solutions are connected, because it is inevitable. They are all circular and they all fit to each other. If any of them fails, it just breaks the chain of the process, the change. We have a lot to talk about.
No, but we're
starting with maybe digitalization.
Standardization, mindset, and disruption.
Yeah,
it's the basic need for our industry right now to move it from where it is to where we want it to be and where actually the industry wants to be. One of the challenges that we find, I guess, when we work together and when we work within the industry is the traditionalness of the industry, the traditional way that we still set up our projects, and the traditional way that we still view the processes and the management of our projects. And things aren't improving, actually. So I think it was Einstein that said, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, it's the definition of craziness or madness or something like that, right? So insanity, that was it.
Insanity. There is a reason, I suppose, for keep things traditional, conventional, and it's the comfort zone.
Yeah.
We are familiar with that. We haven't changed the way we work, the way we operate, the way we see things, because that's what we feel comfortable with. To evolve that, there's a require for change, and change requires effort. And on the other side, change never comes alone. There is need for many. There is need to target many different things, including the processes, including the people's, their mindsets.
But I had a reflection a number of weeks ago about that. The industry itself in a global sense and a local sense is very busy. So how can people change a mindset, or how can people reflect on the way they work if they're so busy in their daily activity and daily life? Then if they're so busy, who has responsibility within the industry for the industry to change, right?
It is, of course, we cannot blame the individuals not to resist to the change if they are flat out with what they already have in the table. So actually, I suppose that it is about everybody involved in the industry as stakeholders who have been preventing this from happening by not allowing enough commodity or spare time to actually embrace something that is quite complicated, which is changing. It requires a lot of effort, really.
I guess it comes back at the end of the day to cost. Without a budget for change can't happen, because to give someone the time to do something different that's not in their daily work process, that's not a billable hour if you're a consultant, that's not working on the construction project if you're a contractor, that requires investment, because there's no income coming from that. That I guess it's R&D, right? It's research and development. How many companies within our industry actually invest in research and development? And part of allowing people the time to do something different and to think a different way, I guess, is research and development.
And how do you budget it without actually knowing how to control, right? We are facing the unknown. Whenever you research, you are taking a different path. And that means that you may or you may not achieve anything.
Yeah.
It is about trial and error. And I suppose that how do you allow budget without limiting the end result? What if you are close to achieve something, but actually
you can't see that in, but it
you
could be
can't
very
see
close.
it, and it may be very close,
Yeah.
but it may also require a lot more of investment without getting actually what you need and running out of budget. So
in some respects, research and development, while it needs to have a time limit, should also not have a time limit, because if you set a time limit for R&D, you don't know what next week could bring after you go past that. Well, we're now finished, guys. We have no more money. But as you say, it could be achievable. That end result could be there with another week's work and so on. The same goes for sciences and everything else, I guess. But within the construction industry, and I wonder, what is the reason for companies not investing in R&D in the construction industry? Is it tradition? Is it because the low margins? Historically, the construction industry is an industry that has very little margin. Companies make very little money. Construction companies, consultants, and so on, compared to other industries.
Well, there is a way, I suppose, to optimize those budgets, and it's not investing parallel on developing and researching the very same thing, company-wise, project-wise. By sharing all these knowledge findings, you prevent others from going through the same mistakes, I suppose, so wasting their budgets, or actually taking advantage of something that is already existing and working and implemented, and actually evolve that, develop over that, so that we optimize the most of the money that is invested on improving the industry.
So what you're saying is we need to be sharing more within the industry in order to change the industry. We need to be more collaborative within the industry in order to allow us to move the industry forward, rather than what we see traditionally is companies being very closed with their internal processes, their internal learnings, their internal experiences more than anything. So we're getting caught in this cycle of repeated error and repeated issues on projects, one after another, because that sharing, and maybe even inside in companies, it's not being shared across departments and
business
sectors
units.
and so on, business units, exactly.
It is, I think it's this misunderstanding of thinking that if you invest in something, it's for your own good, and therefore the more you retain it, the more competitive you are going to be against other companies that maybe are not investing on it, while we are missing out on actually learning from what others have done that actually could make much more profit. In the end, it's a business. It's about profit. And if we think of this industry, specifically construction, it has not changed in centuries, in millennia. We build the very same way.
Foundations up.
Yes, and still we haven't really found a way to be more efficient. We are building the same globally, so we build the same in every single country in the world, and still every country is trying to find their own way of
optimization
of evolving their industry or of
selfishly, I guess, though, evolving themselves inside their own organizations. And you mentioned there, like, companies want to keep that value for themselves because they believe that they can be more competitive with that. And I disagree with that. I think companies are valuable because of their people, not because of their process, not because of their digital workflows. No, it's because of their people that they're valuable. And construction is a heavy people-orientated industry, heavily people-orientated. So while we're focusing on developing the company, we should be looking at focusing on much more than that for the industry at large. Because if we were to move it together as a whole, then the impact we'd have over a short period of time would be enormous. But of course, it is a change in mindset. So we mentioned at the beginning, digitization, standardization, mindset. We've kind of skipped a little bit here to mindset. Let's bring it back to digitization now.
But it's related in a way because the mindset is driven by the way you were mentioning companies, business units, countries, governments. They're trying to find their way of solving their issues and improving the way they are working. But it all goes down to the very single person, to the project manager, to the stakeholders, individuals that are working in the project. So to do that, you need to change the way they have worked in their previous project, so that they don't do exactly the same, meaning there's not going to change anything at all, right? And to do that, you need to change the process. You need to bring in standards, ideally international standards. So let's not focus on the company standard. Let's not focus on the client, the project standard, or the government standard. Let's try to think big. We are going to change something. Let's try to change it like globally, at the big scale. Now we have the chance. We have huge communication networks. We have the opportunity to know what is going on in other countries. We have common languages, and we build exactly the very same way, no matter the country we are working with. So if we actually don't look at the company budget, at the government budget, but actually at the global budget, the achievements are huge. To do that, you need to build a standard so that you are not only not talking the same language or the same industry, construction, project way of working. You are also talking the same standard, the same way of comparing apples and apples in order to quantify
and create more value, right?
Create value, but you need to quantify that. You need to quantify and be able to measure if it's working the way it is being done. Else, you need to change. Let's not think that we are doing a change and believe blindly that it's gonna work, right? You need to test it and being able to measure it.
It's continually evolving the process. It's continually evolving the qualities, and it's continually evolving the standards, because you mentioned there, companies having their own internal standards. Those standards are only of value to the company themselves. They're not actually any value to the industry
or their clients, for that matter.
Yeah, that's my point. So when you go to the marketplace with your standards, they're only, again, valuable to you, but not to your clients, because your clients will be using other companies and other organizations to build other projects. And if they're all using their, not the client standards, but internal consultancy standards, then there is no standard. So looking outwardly on a global market, looking for international standards so that you can standardize internally, but from a global sense, makes you an awful lot more, I guess, competitive globally than locally, right? So by choosing to standardize from a global perspective allows you to automatically become a global organization or a global company, even though you're working in a local market. It has an awful lot of benefits to it. And on top of that, you're also adding to the movement that is now this kind of revolution happening within the construction industry. So that's an interesting point on standards.
I used to think that the standards limit you because they do. They do limit the way you operate and the way you record and track your data and the information in a project. But now, after some time focusing on that, I do think that actually brings a limitless flexibility. So rather than limiting it, it opens a window to being much more flexible, to being able to analyze the data, to be able to accommodate every single client, every single person you work with needs, because it's something that has been tested and that actually works globally.
There's this idea in the industry that by implementing standards and processes, you limit the freedom of the project to develop the project in the way they want. But that's the entire issue that we have in the industry today. Building a house in the countryside, a one-off, is not the same thing as building a 1,100 apartment block in the city centre. They're two completely different things. And our construction industry as it is today is operated on this lack of standards, this idea that flexibility offers value and freedom, whereas it should be more like the manufacturing industry. The manufacturing industry, if you look at car manufacturing, that doesn't offer the project managers freedom of how they would like to construct each and every car. That is absolutely standardized and automated so that production time can go up, cost can come down, and value can be offered back to the end user, i.e. the purchaser of the car at the end. And the construction industry needs to be the same way in order to be able to offer value back to the industry. Right now, at the moment, we have a housing shortage. In almost every capital city in the world, we have a labor shortage. In almost every capital city in the world, in construction, in construction. The only way that we're going to achieve the outputs that we need has to be through standardization and automation, which comes from that, like the car manufacturing industry.
That actually will eventually make everybody feel more comfortable and familiar with the way things are done, I suppose, right? Rather than start from scratch and trying to learn how it's done here, specifically here in this project with this team. If there was a common way of work of operating process, like working in a process, you can actually improve whatever has not been working before. Because let's, as I said, let's not get tied and limit by the way something is proposed. Now, let's change something if something is not working. Let's not be afraid of it.
I'll give you an example. By standardizing and automating our industry, and if we were able to create more value, and what do I mean by more value? Lower cost of construction, basically. Now, I don't mean by lowering costs we get more profits. That lower cost is offered back to the marketplace. Would you like to buy a cheaper apartment in Copenhagen if it was offered to you at 20% or 25% less than the market value? Everybody would be open to that idea. And it's one of the issues within our industry is that it's the least valuable in terms of measuring that value and offering back to the industry than any others. So by kind of revolutionizing how we do and what we do within our industry will offer value back to us as consumers as well. And that's hugely important, you know.
Do you think it's because any of those stakeholders involved is getting profit by getting that extra 20% that the end user is paying?
It's lost value. It's lost value. So I'll give you an example. When we set projects and we set budgets, we allocate a risk allowance, right? A contingency, an UFO-sale. A risk allowance, let's say it's 15 to 20%. That's to manage, that risk and contingency is to manage poor project management and poor decision making and poor delivery. Now, what if we had standardized the entire workflow and it is digitized, of course. Standardization is one thing, but digitization is another value
Sometimes
to that.
It's not the poor management, so let's not blame it on the individual.
No,
I think
not.
sometimes it's just the lack of resources to take those decisions, lack of facts, right?
But then, as I say, if it was standardized, you wouldn't need that resource number. You'd be able to reduce the amount of resources that you need on the project. You'd also be able to reduce the risk on the project. Hypothetically speaking, let's say we're able to take out 15% of the risk and offer that back as value to the consumer. I think there's a lot to be questioned here about how we work in this current climate. It's, again, we can reflect back on the motor industry back into the 70s when Toyota had developed this concept to reduce prices because they weren't as competitive overseas. And it has absolutely worked for them.
I suppose they were able to measure it and actually identify what point of their chain production was actually reducing their profit, right? So to do that, you actually need to quantify and measure.
Yeah, and optimize then once you can see that. That's kind of like, I guess we would call value engineering within our industry. It's not just value engineering in terms of the physical building product, but it's value engineering in terms of the process and value engineering in terms of how we deliver the entire project from inception. You can now take in sustainability and carbon and all of that other aspect. It's cradle to cradle now, isn't it? So we have to be able to standardize that, to be able to measure that, to be able to create value for that. And of course, as you said earlier, digitization is key it's the next step in that. You can standardize, but you need to digitize to be able to manage the amount of information that you're dealing with.
You also want to do it active, not passive, right? So right now we suffer of that lack of constant control or automated control, right? Not so manual, so that you can react to whatever is failing or whenever a project is going south. And unfortunately, that's right now with certain delay, meaning that you cannot mitigate or take action on time just because there is no active control or even sometimes it's not even known what is going on and why something is not working as you expected, just because you cannot,
especially on major projects,
you cannot identify that.
On major projects with a lot of stakeholders, a lot of decision making happening hourly and daily and weekly on projects, it's impossible to have a manual control in that project. If I reflect back to a couple of months ago where we had to do a manual measurement of a project, I was thinking to myself, because I'm in the industry for 20 years, I started off manually measuring off paper.
Manually measuring quantities, right? You mean like manually measuring quantities over the paper with the ruler, kind of, right?
When I reflect back to when I started out, it's crazy the amount of manpower that it took to do that. Even though it took a lot of manpower to create the drawings from an architectural engineering perspective, and then we spend all of this time trying to quantify, to understand, to create the data that we need to measure and control. And now we do it digitally. The majority of it, we do it digitally, right? We have 3D models that the architects and engineers produce, and the byproduct of that is the quantification we need as cost managers and QSs to manage projects. I can't see how we could ever go back.
And that's value lost in a way. I was also involved in that project, I suppose, and I could see all the amount of hours put on doing this manual quantification, which is something quite common on quantity surveying profession today. You know, measuring with a ruler or even dead quantities on a screen, which is the same. And whenever the project changes, we have now some tools to actually compare drawings, but still you need to redo all that work that is absolutely reactive, passive, and doesn't bring any more value than just quantifying it.
Again, it's lost value to the project. So we talk about that lost value earlier on. I just mentioned risk and contingency, but you could also look at all the other costs associated with the delivery of the project. If we're able to bring all of those other costs down by digitization, standardization, then we're reducing cost, we're increasing value, and that for sure can be offered back to the consumer at the end. Meaning, housing comes down, our public investment comes down, meaning we can invest more, higher quality, better social infrastructure, so on and so on and so on. I think, standardization, and we can talk about many different stakeholder groups within our industry about how standardization for them and what the impact for them would mean. But at least in this discussion, we're looking at the topic from a high level. And digitization, I believe it's inevitable. I believe it doesn't matter what you do today, what in your home life, your private life, in your work life, in 5 and 10 years' time, it will be more digitized. It will be something completely different to what you recognize now. And there is no reason that the construction industry will not be the same.
Digitization is about managing information, analyzing information, get an advantage from it. And I also see standardization. You have been talking about how to standardize a process. I see or I understand standardization comparable to a language, a common language. In a project where everybody is talking different language, like the Babel Tower, right? There is miscommunications, there is inefficiencies, there is mistakes. When you have a standardized something, everybody talks the same basis. Everybody is referring to the very same thing. So to me, I see having a standardized, not only the process, but a standardized approach, a standardized communication, way of communication, referring to the things and the elements in construction by the very same name as using the same language across the project.
One of the guys in the office asked us the last, quantity surveying, cost management, it's all about cost. And I said, actually, it has very little to do with cost. It's actually all about communication, because with information, you need to be able to communicate, and it's about communicating with other stakeholders. I guess the more we digitize, the more we standardize, the less human or face-to-face communication is necessary, but the communication between information will be much more accurate, meaning that there'll be less errors and so on, I suppose.
After all, the quantity surveyor, the cost manager, is in the middle of the storm, let's say, right? Is receiving information produced by every single stakeholder, and is that person that needs to put it all together, try to understand it, connect it, look at the interfaces, and actually try to translate everything to a common language, which is the schedule of work, the cost breakdown structure, whatever it is, the cost plan. Is a translator. And this is where it comes in place, that having standardization or a digital approach makes these tasks much more easier. So you don't need to convert and constantly been converting other people's languages, meaning different standards or different ways of understanding the project, and actually trying to put it in a common puzzle to make all the pieces connect with each other.
And you can see it in the industry at the moment, especially in Denmark. Digitization in the last, I guess, 10 to 15 years has really pushed on in the industry. Most of the supply chain now, from the client down to the painter, if you like, or the tiler or the supplier of the windows, is using some type of digital tools. I guess our challenge really within the industry is connectivity between all of these tools and information and stakeholder groups. A lot of companies are trying to digitize for themselves so that they can sell outwardly. It doesn't seem to be that the industry is digitizing on a standardized level, right? And that is a challenge, of course.
But do you think that the trades are digitalizing their process? I think they are.
Some of them,
they are
for sure.
Implementing technological improvements. So they are relying on technology because they have seen that that's actually bringing a benefit, and it reduces man power, but also it increases quality of their end product, right, the production. But I do think that that's limited to technology, not rather than actually digitalizing their business and the data produced. And now we are focusing only on the execution part of it. But let's face it, the construction industry has many different phases, and we are mostly focused always on the direct works of it, the part that we can see and touch, the building, the execution, all the design phase and all the operation phase.
The query or question you raised in relation to the supply chain or the subcontractors digitizing, I think even the move towards using tools and technology in their daily processes is a mindset shift or a mind change, like moving towards more cloud-based solutions for tracking hours or time or locations or accounting, and that's a mind shift, and that's the change that we need. It all needs to start somewhere, I guess. We can't expect, and this is one of the things in the industry that is really causing confusion when we talk about digitalization and technologies, is people think that you need to do an awful lot very quickly. That's why people aren't making the move. They think it's going to be super expensive. It's going to take so much time, and they need to purchase or procure so many platforms and solutions, and it's just so overwhelming to everybody. But that's actually not what it's about. It's about small steps. Again, like someone using a bit of technology to to become more streamlined in their activity to offer them some value. That's the first step in that mind shift change.
But maybe it's because we are assuming that the technology is there. And that might be maybe the starting point. I do think that there's a lot of development in tools, software, technology, instruments, right? But that maybe is planned with a little bit of disconnection of what is actually needed in the industry, on the field, right, or on the office. And to do that, of course, you need to test it, but then it is about maybe creating synergies between the developers or the two different fields, and it all goes back to, I suppose, also education. We have a lot of double degrees, trying to connect different industries. We have seen a huge revolution and disruption in the medical industry, where they have actually created double degrees that connect medical and biological knowledge, physics knowledge, connected with IT and computer science. And I do think that at the moment, this development is only driven by individuals who had a passion for digitalization, and they are skilled into programming and computer science, that are actually suffering and very involved in the issues on the construction industry, and have decided to shift career or specialize on trying to focus on this. But unfortunately, I think that the power, the task force is minimal at the moment, and they are not always supported by the companies, the government, the funds,
But it's also part of our industry. It's difficult to attract people to the construction industry because it's considered a very heavy, male-orientated labor type of industry. When in some respects, it is if you're doing your one-off house, but not when you're doing your large construction developments, or what we do as consultants. A lot of that, I guess, can be attractive if people knew about it, right? So that's one thing, I guess, to try and bring people, cross-pollination from other industries into the construction industry. Just come back to one point that you made about you don't believe the technology is there. I don't know. I think we haven't caught up to the capabilities of what's available yet. Yes, the connectivity across technologies might be struggling, but if we really caught up to the technologies themselves, then we would know how to connect those technologies. And right now, the industry is so siloed and vertical that we struggle somewhat to connect horizontally across. So like the design stage, the pre-construction is one silo, the execution is another silo, the facilities management is another silo. Inside in those individual silos, you have more silos of companies and disciplines and deliveries and so on. And sometimes not a lot of them are connected. Even when clients start their project at the very beginning, they don't know where they want to be at procurement stage, never mind after construction, and forget about 30, 40 years down the road. But I think that's all now changing. I believe we can see it. I think we can see it changing, that we're looking more horizontally across than vertically up, I think.
They're speaking different languages, as I mentioned before. So now we can see the power of networking, the power of not networking as relations, personal relationships, but more as networking the data, the information, everything produces, and how to take advantage of it at different stages of the project.
And again, it will take an awful lot of work to connect all of these elements together to get us to where we need to be. But it's not something that we're going to solve in the next year. It's decades down the road. The fourth revolution here is going to take decades to get us where we want to be. But two things is one is it's inevitable, it's going to happen. The second one is we all need to do it as a singular industry, not just as individuals or companies or countries or whatever the case may be. It has to be industry-wide globally.
It's going to take decades because the research and the exploring, and testing needs to be done, but also because I think we need to overcome the resistance to the change by actually skipping generations. So we need to take advantage of fresh-minded new people coming to the industry, not necessarily young ones. That's everybody that is willing to change it and actually comes with new ideas and cannot understand why things are done the way are done and foresee that that's ridiculous. Sometimes it is, and actually bringing and being supported by other newcomers that agree with their proposals. And to do that, I think it all goes to education. We need to emphasize this on the education. So as long as educators keep connected to the traditional and conventional ways of construction and building, they will educate this way because it's the way they know, and I'm not blaming them.
No.
But also, as you say, we are lacking people that is willing to get involved in such an industry because they can foresee that it's tough, is rough, and it is not creative, not inviting, not attractive. Because why are you going to be manually measuring lines in the screen?
I think we will definitely come back to that subject about education later, especially from a cost management, quantity surveying perspective, because it's something personally I'm passionate about, because we need to change. We need constructive thinking, critical thinking. We need people just to be asking all the questions daily about the way we work, why we do it in this way. Because if we're passive coming out of university as young, educated students, that means we're going to be passive for the rest of our lives unless we can change our mindsets, right? But ideally, it's the universities that set the foundation for the way we think in terms of our creativity and our critical thinking. So we'll come back to that subject. I think that's a big one.
I really believe that the change in mindset in the industry will also open a door to the other 50% of the population, the female students and female professionals that right now are reluctant to get into the industry, or actually not attracted at all by it because of how conventional it really is, and how not welcoming in some sectors it may be. There's
some great females working in the industry on LinkedIn that are disrupting the entire thing, from machine drivers to women in BIM to quantity surveyors, project managers. It is absolutely fascinating to see it, and that disruption is also beginning to change the mindset. It's all connected, right? So standardization, digitization, mindset, disruption, it's all connected. By doing one, you will automatically move towards another, because they're the inevitable steps, right? Whichever one you start first doesn't really matter.
Once you normalize it, it stops being the new thing, the revolutionary thing in the industry, and actually it becomes the new norm. And once you see that, you actually feel like left behind, and it's like, oh, I'm late now. Everybody's doing it, and I don't even have a clue of what these people are talking about.
There will be
it's gonna be very fast, that's for sure, and we can see it in the last 5 years. It's been crazy, the developments and
the connectivity on social media we have with LinkedIn and Twitter and these type of platforms means that we can communicate now globally quite quickly, and I think that is one of the big hindrances of the construction industry up until 15 years ago, is that we really struggled to communicate globally, meaning that the industry itself was a very local industry. You could obviously, as individuals, move abroad and take your knowledge and experience with you, or as companies move abroad and take your knowledge and experiences with you. But in terms of kind of global standardization and that speed of transferring knowledge and education and understanding has come massively in the last 15 years. So it's one of the reasons that we are now seeing this huge trend in digitization and construction. And it, as you say, it is just going to explode in this decade. We will not be working the same way we are today in 2030. It will be completely different.
maybe in a way that we cannot even foresee or imagine. Nope. And I'm very excited to see that time come.
It's one of the most exciting periods within the construction industry after the Industrial Revolution, I guess, right? But right now, it is super exciting. And as you say, who knows where it's going to end up in the next decade.
We are at the very, very bottom of industrial revolutions. I think we do the things the same way we were doing in Mesopotamia, it's just gonna be amazing. I'm really looking forward. I hope to live to that.
It's going to go so radical that we're going to start building from the roof down rather than the foundations up.
I wish.
Yeah, no, but and that kind of leads us on, and what we're talking about is disruption. And for us as individuals, we like to disrupt. Us as a company, we like to disrupt. We want to change the way we do things today and do them completely different tomorrow, for the better. Not to make the industry worse, not to make more financial gain, not to put people in a poor situation, but as an industry as a whole, to make things better for everybody within the industry. And as we mentioned about value creation, for also everybody outside of our industry. Because construction, whether you see it or not, affects everybody's daily life, whether they work in it or not. If you're a nurse in a hospital, that hospital was built by someone. That hospital was designed by someone. Decisions were taken in order to affect that person's daily work environment. Yep. If you live at home, in your house or your apartment or wherever you live, that construction directly affects your daily environment. So the disruption and the revolution within our industry is not for the industry on its own. It's actually for everybody on this planet. And I think that's something that's important to get out there. Whereas other industries might reflect inwardly on themselves, the construction industry reflects outwardly on everything that we do.
And it's not only about buildings and housing, it's also infrastructure.
Everything.
Transport industry.
Transportation, social interactions, you name it. It's
even food production. Every single industry is actually affected by construction, infrastructure. Yeah.
I think the reason that we're doing this, I guess, is, well, for me personally, is to be able to communicate with the industry and talk about the industry and talk about the problems and talk about hopefully solutions as well. And for me, we really want interaction with people. We want to hear people's opinion. We want people to give their opinion of what we talk about, whether it's the good, bad, or the ugly. It doesn't really matter for us. It's just to be able to communicate and get this communication going within the industry.
Yeah. I see this as a huge opportunity to actually reach people outside our circles, our environment, people we are not working with or that don't even know about us and what we do, but may think like us or opposite to us. And, it always enriches to hear different approaches and visions of where are we going and where are we now.
Yeah. So we want people to comment, to like, and to come back to us. Yeah. You can take out all of that stuff.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.